As a leader of the opposition, do you have to oppose anything that Mr. Holness says?
What's this thing about you not being Jamaican, that you're British?
You think Mr. Holness is a good Prime Minister?
I think he has had his 9 years and it's time to move on.
Boom! Let's Be Honest podcast, maddest podcast, baddest podcast, and saddest podcast. And today, this is a very, new type of interview for me because I've never interviewed a politician. Met a lot of them, but I've never interviewed one. Today we have Mark Golden. Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you too.
Leader of the opposition.
Jay Phrase.
Jay Phrase, yeah.
Yeah, man.
So Mark, what going?
I'm here, man. It's good to be with you.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this one. Different style, I'm sure,
And Jamaicans talk about that, I'm a born labor right or born PMP.
Right.
I would be a born PMP,
Okay.
Yeah, but waiting about even that. Like people say they're born this and they're born that. It's not more like the policies and the laws.
Right.
And just like, I'm born PMP, my mother PMP, and my grandmother say I'm PMP. You think that need to change?
Well, put it this way. I think the culture in the home and what the people were exposed to from their parents or grandparents and the philosophy that they were taught about how politics should go on, what the role of politics is. I can understand how people come out of a tradition and feel a connection to it. Mm-hmm. I personally never came out of a tradition because my parents weren't really politically aligned either side. I dare say they may have voted both sides. I don't know. But I understand why people feel that way. But of course, in a mature democracy, one would expect people to, rather than be umbilically connected to a particular party from birth, at some point they should start to be more analytical. They should be looking at what's going on, what the different parties are offering and their track record and make a choice as to what they think is best. I think that's how a mature democracy ought to function. But I do understand why people feel the way they do because, if you come out of a home where politics is a strong ethos, there's a lot of that going on in the home. Parents talking about things, putting their views forward. It's natural that people might, imbibe that, might internalize that, and it would, govern them or at least influence the way they think going forward. So I'm not surprised.
I get you. Mm-hmm. And you growing up, what was like your brought up to like in terms of schooling?
Yeah.
You say your parents are not really.
Right.
Is it because you were wealthy growing up? Because them say the upper class don't really care about politics as much.
Let me tell you, I'm not sure if that latter part of it is really true, because I think a lot of upper class people are politically aligned. But in my parents' case, I grew up on the university campus. There's a section on Mona Road when you're going down towards Hermitage and Augustown on the right called College Common. That's where I was born and grew. So my father was a professor of orthopedic surgery at UWI, and my mother was initially a civil servant, and then when she got married and had children, she moved to the rehab center that my father started, the Mona Rehab Center for persons with physical disabilities. Mm-hmm. He died in 1996 and then named it after him, so it's now called the Sir John Golding Rehab Center. So I grew up there. I guess in the scheme of Jamaica, we would have been considered relatively well off. Didn't live an opulent life. Mm-hmm. Professors at that time weren't particularly well paid, and so on. So, but the house we lived in was a standard college common house for university lecturers and professors. It was a very lovely community to grow in. Big gardens around, and roaming, riding bicycle, go down to the river, which was really the overflow from the Mona Dam, but it was like a river, playing in that, fishing in that, walking to the dam, just exploring campus and playing a lot of football and cricket, climbing trees, all the sort of things that children used to do a lot of, and I don't think they do anymore.
Yeah.
But it was a nice environment to grow up in.
How high school?
I went to Campion College.
Oh,
yeah. I went to Mona Prep, which was on Old Hope Road, which was a great school. Founded by the founding principal, a lady called Daphne K. Vidal Smith. She was a great educator, a very serious woman. You didn't run any joke with her because she had her cane there, Mr. Tickler, and if you cross the line, you would get a touch, But it was broad in its scope. Music, it had a strong program in music, had an orchestra and a choir. You know, football, that school has always done well in Alberga Cup, which is a football competition at that time, and academics as well. So it was a good school, a good foundation for me educationally.
What's this thing about you not being Jamaican, that you're British?
Well, I don't know. That is just a propaganda that has been pushed by my political opponents. You know, I'm born here. I grew here. I did study abroad. But when I finished my studies, I came back here straight away. My father was from the UK. Mm-hmm. He came here in 1953. He was Jamaica's first orthopedic surgeon. And he stayed here. There was a polio epidemic. He was put in charge by the government of the day in the 50s to sort that out. That's how the rehab center got started. It was originally a polio rehab center. Okay. Now it's more broad and covers a full range of issues to do with disability, physical disability. So he never left Jamaica. He served Jamaica. He established Hope Valley School, experimental school, a primary school for able-bodied and disabled children to have an integrated education. Started the National Road Safety Council, because obviously as an orthopedic surgeon, he used to see a lot of results of traffic accidents and the terrible effects on people, paralysis and those things. So, you know, he started that, and that's still going strong. It's a main agency pushing road safety issues in Jamaica. So although he wasn't born here, and, you know, he was British, but he lived most of his career, because he came, I think, in his late 30s, and he stayed until he died. He's buried, you know, on Slipe Road, and my mother's buried at in the cemetery at St. Andrew Parish Church. She just died last year, actually, in September. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, my mother grew up here. She grew up in Savlamar. Her father was born in St. James, Cambridge St. James. Her mother was from the UK. And my mother grew up her life in Sav. He died when she was 7. He was a doctor too. He was the head of Savlamar Hospital. Mm. And then she came to Kingston with her mother and her little brother, went to St. Andrew High School for girls. And as I said, she studied abroad. She came back. She worked in the civil service. She was one of the first 3 Jamaican women to be employed in the civil service in an administrative post. And she eventually moved from there in the 60s and went to work with my father at the rehab center. And she spent the rest of her working life as essentially a volunteer, helping to run the non-medical things that they do there, because they do a lot of different things to employ people and sell things, that they make things and sell them, placemats, Christmas cards, a whole range of things. She used to run that side of it for my father.
So first time, why is it's a problem? If let's say you were British, right? Because I know that Edward was born
American.
Yeah. And then I always say, like in Parliament, it comes up and people have to denounce them citizenship. Why it's a big issue?
In the Constitution of Jamaica, to be eligible to sit in Parliament, you can be a Commonwealth citizen, but you cannot be a non-Commonwealth citizen. Okay. That's how it is from 1962. So if you have UK citizenship, or you're Barbadian, or you're a Trinidadian, or you're any country in the Commonwealth, African country that is in the Commonwealth, Nigeria, Ghana, whatever, you're eligible, as long as you live here, you're eligible to run and be elected, or you're eligible to be a senator. If you're from another country that's not in the Commonwealth, like the US, you're not eligible. So some of those who have been making the most noise about this are persons who ran when they were not eligible in 2007. They were taken to court, they lost the case, and they had to renounce their citizenship. In my case last year, because I was born of a father who was from the UK, I had inherited so I was a dual citizen, Jamaican and UK. They made a big fuss about it. I didn't really pay it much mind, but I wanted to know how people felt. So a few months after the fuss had subsided, we did a poll. We got a professional pollster to poll people how they felt about leaders, like prime ministers, being dual citizens. And a majority, I think it was about 58%, said they didn't think that was right. So I decided to renounce my British citizenship, and I did. And I concluded that process in August last year. So now I'm just only have my Jamaican citizenship, which is fine. Because the truth is, I went into public life, meaning I became a minister really in 2011 when we won the general election in 2011. Yeah. I became Minister of Justice. I stopped using my UK passport from then because I didn't feel comfortable really traveling on it as a minister of Jamaican government. And so giving it up wasn't really a big thing for me. But the principle of it was kind of cute because, strictly speaking, the Constitution allowed me to be a dual citizen because I was a Commonwealth citizen and a Jamaican. So there was no legal reason to give it up. But I decided it was the right thing to do.
People them.
Yeah.
Now, as a leader of the opposition, do you have to oppose anything that Mr. Holness says? Is that case where, like, let's say Mr. Holness say, let's just grow trees because trees are good, and you're like, no, cut down the tree just because you're in the opposition.
Well, that would be moronic, that would make no sense at all. So no, it is not the case that you oppose everything that they do or say. And the truth of the matter is, if you look, for example, legislation going through Parliament, 95 of it is supported by supported by both sides. We may make points about it to say, well, this language isn't quite clear enough, or this may be inconsistent with that, so you need to fix it and so on. But we very rarely actually oppose something that's going through Parliament, because typically the way legislation is developed, a lot of input goes into it before it reaches Parliament from all sorts of technical people and stakeholders. So it's unusual for us to oppose it. There have been a few. We opposed the elimination of the office of the political ombudsman a year ago, and they put that office into the ECJ, which is the Electoral Commission, and said the electoral commissioners are now the political ombudsman as well. We didn't think that was a good idea, so we did oppose that. And the recent Portmore legislation to make it a parish, we did oppose that because we were against the way in which it was being done. Not that Portmore shouldn't be a parish, but how you go about it is very important, especially because the way they've done it means that they're going to be adjusting the electoral boundaries, the constituency boundaries, in a way that clearly benefits them politically. And that's, we think, the real motivation behind why they did it. And we've taken that to court. So some things we will resist, but only the things that we think are important and principle dictates that we should resist it.
Yeah. Before I was doing this interview, I told somebody who's big in politics. I'm like, I'm going to interview Mark Goldie, and they're like, I'm really rich. I'm like, for real? Like, yeah, rich. So why politics?
Well, first, I'm not going to argue that categorization of me, but put it this way. I started with two friends, DB&G, Darren Bunting and Golding Limited, in 1992. And, it was a startup, Chris Daring and Peter Bunting and myself. I did very well, and we built the business, and it was successful. We got into a variety of financial services, managing people's funds and so on. And then we decided that we didn't want to be wedded to it for our entire life. So we decided to sell, and we sold it to Scotiabank. They bought it in 2006. And then 4 years later, we had signed a non-compete agreement with Scotia that we wouldn't go into another business for at least 3 years. So when that period ended, we formed Proven Investments, which is now Proven Group. And that is still, functioning and going strong. So, I have a strong background in business, and also I'm a corporate lawyer. And that's really what I do professionally. I'm the senior partner of a firm, one of the Jamaica's leading law firms, Hartmere Hedfata. So I have that, background. But when we sold DB&G in 2006, it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity because I had been really focused on building that business and supporting it. And, I had other legal clients as well, but I would say roughly half of my time was on DB&G related things. And when we sold that, it was an opportunity now to do something different. And I'd always been interested in national affairs. I wasn't politically involved really, but I would lean towards the PNP. Peter Bunting was my good friend. I'd helped him back in 1993 in his first campaign when he ran against Hugh Shearer in Southeast Clarendon. I also helped Omar Davies, who I knew through the financial sector, because I was the lawyer for the Jamaica Security Dealers Association, which was set up. I was the first lawyer for them. We had a lot of dealings with the government on policy to do with the financial sector. So I got to know him, Dr. Davies. So, when he was running to be leader after PJ was retiring, I had got involved in his campaign, but I wasn't actually even a member of the party at that time. But in 2007, when the PNP lost after the 18 years, Portia, who was the Sister P, who was a party leader, she reached out and invited me to go into the Senate as one of the 8 opposition senators. And I had time to do that, and I was interested in it.
If you just sell a company, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I decided, let me give it a try, And I like, the legislative process. And as a lawyer, you have a certain, you're trained in how to read it and understand it and that kind of thing. So that's what I did. And, the nature of things, Jay, you get sucked in, one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
So, next thing I was a spokesperson for industry and commerce, opposition spokesperson. After that, I became treasurer of the party for a period of time. And we won the 2011 elections by a landslide. And I was asked to be Minister of Justice. And that was, 4 to 5 years, really 4 years of hard work. And then we lost the election in 2016. But we'd achieved a great deal for Jamaica in those 4 years. And I was kind of ready to ease off. I was, that's my period of public service, looking forward to a much more relaxed life. And then a couple of things happened, and I got drawn back in, and I became chairman of the constituency of South St. Andrew. I had been on the executive because Dr. Davis had asked me to come on, and I was interested in Trenchtown, which is South St. Andrew, from a musical perspective, because I love the music and things. So I was kind of interested in the culture of it, but I wasn't involved in the politics really, although I was on the executive. But when he decided to step back after the 2016 election, people started to say, you have to step up now, And the chairmanship was the first thing, and I was humming and hawing, but I decided, right, let me do a few walks in the constituency and just feel what it's like, I hadn't done anything like that before. And I remember the first walk I did was in Craigtown, with some brethren of mine and thing, and then there was a massive, just followed me, and we went through all sections of Trenchtown, around the gully and certain place where them some, no MP never come here, so anyway, it was, the people just were very receptive, and I just kind of decided, well, let me continue to feel what is, and then, by the time I got caught up in it and decided to go for it, and I won, which was a contest. There was another person who was seeking the same position, but I was chosen. And then a year after that, Dr. Davis resigned as MP because he was coming out completely now. Same day that Portia resigned, the two of them resigned on the same day. So that meant there had to be a by-election in the constituency. And I was the natural, as a chairman and thing, it was natural that I would put myself forward, and I did. And was, became an MP in 2017. And then, 2020 election come, we got badly beaten. We only had 14 MPs in the House out of 63. I was one of the 14. Dr. Phillips, who had been the party leader at that time, decided, he was not going to continue in that role. So there was a vacancy. And myself and Lisa put ourselves forward. And again, I wasn't planning to do this, but people were weighing in on me saying, you have to do this now, this is your time, blah, blah, blah. So I thought about it, me and my wife reasoned about it, pray about it and thing, and eventually decided, all right, I'm going to try to deal with this thing. So I put myself forward, a campaign about 2 months, and the delegates chose me. So I became party leader and leader of the opposition. But that was in November 2020. So that's how I am where I am,
So this is going to be the first election?
First general election as party leader, yeah.
But Mark Golding, the name, growing up, the name doesn't ring a bell. And it kind of makes sense now because by the time you really in a politics, you're a big man.
Yeah.
So, what I said, like a Lisa Hanna now, where she would have the clout, per se. How people differentiate from somebody who has the name, not saying she's a bad politician, but somebody who has the name versus somebody who's more reserved, but them have the real policy, them want the best for the culture. How them differentiate that? Because enough time with politics, to me, it seems like a popularity contest.
It does. I mean, I agree with you, because when you see some of the polls that are run as to who's the best minister or who's the best spokesperson, the results, to my mind, are not based on who's actually doing well or doing a good job. It's really about who has most exposure and who's most popular out there, So that's the nature of it. But, in my case, I think the PNP structure, the leader of the party is chosen by the delegates. Now, the delegates are persons who are selected by their party groups, which are the grassroots of the party, now choose their delegates to go to conference and vote for the leader. So those are political activists, really. These are people who are steeped in the politics, know it well at the grassroots level, typically. So they are looking for somebody who they think can run the party, who can unite the party. Because coming out of the 2020 situation, we had a lot of issues that we had to sort out internally. And also somebody who they probably felt had the necessary experience and skills to take the party into government and run the government well. I never interrogated the delegates and asked them why they voted for me, but I can imagine that, because as you have said, I was only first in representational politics in 2017. Before that, I was in the Senate for 10 years. I was Minister of Justice for 4 years, but people who don't really follow politics now probably didn't know who I was. Although we did a lot of good things, including the decriminalization of ganja and so on. That was my thing. I pioneered that and developed that, passed that into law, developed the cannabis industry around medical and therapeutic and what have you. So there were things that I got recognition from those who are watching and interested, but most people out there, they're not really busy with politics more than so. Yeah. So you're right. I mean, for example, Lisa was Miss World, very beautiful lady, charming, articulate, etc. So, I mean, there was a choice that the delegates had to make, but, they chose me, and by a majority. I mean, so I don't know. I don't know what the thinking was, but we are where we are.
Yeah. Young people nowadays, including myself, you probably think I'm in my 30s, but I'm not. The housing market is crazy.
It is.
And then when you look for minimum wage, and this were like professionals, people who come out of UE, spend a bunch of years, even doctors, and the pay with them I get, it not add up. No. Like as a person, I'm a resident of the States as well. Groceries in Jamaica, way more than America.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, because we import.
Right.
I don't know what the PNP have planned for, like, make younger people can own some house, boy.
Well, we've been giving that a lot of thought, and we have some ideas. First of all, we want to establish within the NHT a fund to assist young people to get their deposit. Because at the time, the hard part is you have to have the deposit, whether it be 10% or whatever the deposit is. It's not usually more than 10, but it's often up there, and a lot of people just can't, because of the cost of living that they mentioned and how high it is and salaries being relatively low, they can't really save enough for the deposit to pay down on the house. So we want to establish a fund. We've said we're going to do that of $1 billion, where any young person who's been contributing to the NHT for at least 2 years would be entitled to a grant towards their deposit of $500,000. And that is something which has played well because people see the need for it. We also have, for persons who are informally employed, meaning that they don't have a job where the employer is, making payroll deductions and so on, and they don't have a pay slip. It's hard for them to establish their proof of income to qualify for a mortgage loan. And we have a thing called rent to own, which is an idea that we have put out there that we want to implement. So if somebody who is a successful blogger or whatever and is making money that way, or whatever they may be doing, buying and selling or whatever, but they don't have a pay slip, they can apply for an NHT house and they can go in as a tenant. And over a relatively short period of time, we're thinking about 6 months, the rent would be fixed at the same amount as the mortgage would be. Okay. And as long as they're current and show that they can make the payments over, say, 6 months, then they would qualify for the mortgage without having to produce a pay slip. And then they could just roll that up and then get the mortgage and buy the house. Similarly now, under the rent to own, there's another category of person now who is struggling. They're renting where they live now, but they don't have it. Times are so hard, they can't save for the deposit. And we would say, all right, they could rent an NHT house. And we would allocate a portion of their rental payments towards a deposit fund for them. So part of the rent would go, a good chunk of it would go into that rent account. And once your rent account equals the deposit that they need to pay, then they can draw down the mortgage and become the owner. So we're thinking about these things. We also want to over the last 12 years, $11.4 billion has been taken out of the NHT every year towards the budget. And it has really depleted the NHT of its cash resources and made it difficult for them to do the kind of transformational development of housing, affordable housing in particular, that really was the mandate for which they were established back in the 1970s under Michael Manley. So we want to recapitalize the NHT with lands, public lands that are suitable for housing, and then they can develop those lands in affordable housing solutions and sell them. And we are not going to charge the purchaser of the house for the land portion of it. We're going to exclude that from the price, which means if instead of an affordable house, say, costing $14 million, it may cost 11 or so, you know, that kind of range based on our calculations. So that will immediately do two things. So one, it will make the house more affordable, especially for young professionals or persons who are just getting started in the home ownership game. And secondly, when they buy it, they will immediately have some equity in it because they would have got the house without having had to pay for the land portion of the value. And that would be a benefit to them. And they can, you know, use that in the future as part of their asset base and their own personal and family wealth. So these are some of the ideas that we have. There are a few other things we want to do as well. You know, for some of our existing NHT borrowers, public servants, for example, you know, there was a policy in place that they got a discount on the interest rate on their mortgage loan for being a public servant. That was taken away from them. We want to put that back in place for them. For the borrowers at the lowest band, which is, I think, persons who earn up to $30,000 a week, they are in the lowest band. Right now, the insurance on the house, which is part of what they pay each month in their mortgage payment, has gone up because insurance rates, because of climate change and so on, insurance is getting more expensive. We said that we will let the fund absorb, the NHT will absorb the mortgage costs for that category of borrower and give them a break, you know? So those are some of the things. There are a couple of other things, like, for example, for public sector workers, again, right now, the way that the NHT assesses whether you're eligible to borrow is what they call the debt service coverage ratio, which is a relationship between the monthly payment and your monthly income. Yeah? And you can't be more than a certain percentage of that. And for the public sector workers, we're going to increase that percentage to give them more lee room to borrow a bit more so they can afford a house more easily. So we're really looking at the housing thing and trying to see how we can solve the problem. So we plan to do a major build out over the next 5 years of affordable housing, because that's really been a gap over the last 10 years or so. There's been a lot of construction of new buildings and new houses, but typically they're at prices that are not really within the outer range for most of our young people.
So, all right, so like how the young people that are complaining about them can't get in a house, and then we have Minister Tufton now who's saying that we should have more kids. I feel like
I quit.
Yeah, you know, because more kids, more bills, kids them have to go to school, picnic have to eat.
That's right.
So how I don't understand, like, what the people them supposed to do.
I don't think you can tell somebody to have more children. That's a personal decision that they have to make based on their circumstances, right? But what I would say is this: if we can get the economy to grow, which it has not been doing, and we can create more wealth in the society by having a stronger economy that's growing, then people will find it will be more affordable to live, and people will be able to afford to have children if they want. You know, and I think one of the reasons why people aren't having as many children as before is because they know they can't afford the cost of raising a child the way they'd like to raise them, because it's expensive. So if the economy improves, people are earning better salaries because the jobs that are available are better jobs and so on, I think we will find people more inclined to have children.
Well, is that case so the country really need more kids?
Well, what he's talking about really is that if you look at the trend, the demographic trend over time, we have an aging population. So the percentage of the population that are in the older age brackets relative to the percentage that's in the younger age brackets has shifted over the last 30 years. It used to be more weighed towards younger people. Now it's moving more towards the older people. So there's a concern that over the medium to long term, we're going to find that we have more older people to look after, and we're not going to have enough young people to do the jobs that are available. So I think that's what's driving his thing about we should have more children. But it doesn't really work that way. You have to fix the economy.
Yeah, but what's the incentive?
Yeah, there is none. And if he's going to encourage, you need to have that. You know, you need to have an incentive.
Yeah, because me personally, I want to have kids. You know, I have 2 dogs right now, I tell you. Stressing. Stressing. Every time I got to vet, I tell you, some breed and money I have to spend, so I can only imagine.
I can relate. I have a dog too, and yes, you know, they take a lot to look after them, and so do children, more so even. So it is. But you know, they bring you great joy, Jay. They bring you great joy. And you know, it's so, you know, if you feel inclined, you know, hopefully as you do more interviews with man like me, your money start turn up and they can go on.
Sure. I'm not try rich like you know. All right, crime.
Yeah.
Crime Jamaica has that top 3 from 2000 to right now in terms of murder per capita.
Yeah.
What do you feel need to be done? Like, and do you think it's time for the whole Don culture and all of that need to go out of the inner city, or is that a case where the Dons are the area leader for say is an important role and them for do them role better?
That's a really good question. In my experience, communities are less, there's less of the phenomenon of one individual running the place in a way that was the norm for, what the so-called garrison areas and so on, say 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's less of that. But you still have a lot of youths who gravitate towards the gun culture and badness for one reason or another. Sometimes it's because they don't see any way out, and that is how them get them props, and that's how them feel like them as muddy and thing. Or sometimes it's because they get recruited and pressured into that lifestyle and what have you. I mean, in order to change the dynamic around crime in Jamaica, I think it has to be a multifaceted approach. So, first of all, I think the country has to embrace a more moral approach to living, so that how we deal with ourselves, how we deal with each other, embracing the idea that truth is important, honesty is important, love and respect for each other is important, and building our country by collective effort is important. These values and attitudes, we need to push them from the young coming right up, so that people adopt a more wholesome mindset, because some of the ways that people behave and things that they're doing is not right. Secondly, we have to support our police officers and the law enforcement. And we need to give them the tools that they need to do their work, the investigative tools, the laws that support what they have to do, and the basic infrastructure and equipment that they need. Yes, that's important. But then that's not sufficient, because you can control murder maybe for a period of time by hardcore policing, like what is going on now. But at the end of the day, is that sustainable? We have shown in the past it's not sustainable. So you need to make a sustainable solution. You have to deal with the reasons why youths turn to that lifestyle. And you have to give them another opportunity. So there needs to be a program focusing on the youths who are either out of school now, they don't have any certification, they don't have any subjects, their position in the job market is very weak, and they are there on the corner, and they want, they want to be somebody too, they want respect too, they want a girl too, etc. So them tend to go towards the badness side of it. We need to give them another route to being productive citizens, by things like training opportunities, mentorship, financial literacy, and preparation for the world of work. We need a program that takes those youths and gives them a new orientation so that they can actually step up in a different way. And so we're committed to that as well. And things like peace management initiative, which has been allowed to collapse, but which was a very good innovation, where you look in communities which are prone to violence, you identify people who are respected in there but are not really involved. Maybe they were at one time, but they kind of evolve out of that now. But they have the respect because people know what they, how they live and thing, and they live good in the community. And you bring them on board, you give them some training, and you give them some support, and they can be called interrupters then, violence interrupters. So if something go down, where two people kick off or whatever, and say some disrespect was shown or a perceived disrespect, and the way how that can play out, that might result in all kind of things spinning off until you have a series of incidents where people dead and things. They jump in and help to coordinate a solution, talk it out, trash it out. And then, that has worked well in some communities. We need to implement those systems, and supported by the state as well, so that they have a little resources to do that job. So it's a multifaceted thing. The churches, NGOs as well have their role to play in trying to reorient the culture away from the negative into the positive. And young people, influencers like you too, have a role to play in terms of not just discouraging the mindset, which is that, to take life or to be the baddest guy and have the biggest gun is something to be respected. No, that not going away. That is you end up in a cemetery
RGP.
RGP, So we need to. Everybody needs to. Who cares about the society, cares about themselves and their family, need to reorient the whole philosophy, the whole narrative of how we deal with each other in a more positive direction.
Yeah, and then you mentioned it did work because even in Augustown there was a year where there was no.
You know it.
Zero murders.
Andre Hilton was the MP who put that in place, working closely with the community, influential people in the community, some of the top artists down in that side and others, and the Peace Management Initiative, and they had a year with no murders, and that was after a period of time when there had been a problem with murders, and then it was allowed to, unfortunately, it broke down, and now it's under a Zozo. Augustown has been under a Zozo for years now. In fact, I was in a meeting last week, Thursday night, and in a community meeting at Augustown Primary School, and they were saying, when will it end? How does a Zozo end? And it's a good point, because there's no clear criteria as to what should trigger the withdrawal of a Zozo and restoration of normalcy in the community. And that's something we have to look at, because it can't be that these things are just, they have to be renewed periodically in Parliament. But when they come to be renewed, typically people just support it because they think this is managing to keep crime down and so on. But when you've been doing this for like 5 years, at what point are you going to say, well, this is enough? This is enough.
Yeah, because at the same time, it's like, all right, nothing now go on, no.
Right.
But that probably only go on because you're there.
Right.
The soldiers are there.
Right.
So if you take out the soldiers now, did you change the mindset of people? Who have the conflict, resolve them conflict?
Well, a Zozo to me ought to be integrated with a thing like Unite for Change or Project Star, so that where you're really not, there's a security side of it which the police and soldiers deal with, but just as importantly, or more importantly, is the interventions that provide youth with other opportunities. The same thing I was talking about earlier, training, and some people don't have them birth certificate, you help them get those things sorted out, your readiness for work, parenting skills taught, and all these things to just make the community stronger, more cohesive. Yeah. And so that when people start to buy into the idea that they can build a strong community without having to go back there, so that when you withdraw the excessive presence of the soldiers and police, and that the community as a whole is in a position to ensure that it moves forward in a positive way and doesn't regress to what it was before. But I don't think the Zozo have really done that effectively yet, because they've done some zinc fence removal and then patched some road and some things like that, but I don't see the kind of comprehensive interventions that Unite for Change was designed to do and was doing. Our Project Star, which is a PSOJ initiative, has been doing in a few communities. That needs to become the norm in all of these Zozo areas.
Yeah. And then the music, we always say this music influence violence. What's your take on that?
That's a controversial one. It's like a chicken and egg, Is it that music reflects society, or is it the music that is influencing society, And I think it's both. I think that, artists come out of communities and their own life experience, and that's what they sing about, But at the same time, the way they portray it and how they deal with the lyrics and things can also be very influential on others, including others who may not have experienced that lifestyle, but just rate the lyrics and the way the man flash it and thing, and then they start buy into that thing. So I think that's very important, that the musicians, the influential musicians, have to understand the role that they play. And I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of artistic expression and so on. But I think that there needs to be a constant dialogue with those, with those more influential artists, so that they can understand the role they play in society too, and it's positive rather than negative. Yeah.
But my question to you, do you think it's the music or the musician? So, for instance, let's say John Brown, no-name artist, sings, killed 10 men with a rifle. I don't know him.
Right.
You get me, I say? Right. And then sometimes, the reason I'm asking for the music or the musician, it's who it come from and who it believable from. Right. So there's certain artists, right now, Chronic say walk with the rifle. Chronic, stop, you don't walk with the rifle.
Right.
You walk with a red and a staff.
Right.
You don't walk with rifles.
Right.
But if Cartel say it, Cartel wants something more believable. So sometimes I feel like it's the individual. And then obviously we see a lot of artists, musicians, behind bars. So enough of these guys, they're not even artists, they're criminals. So I don't think it's fair, but we use that all the while say influence violence, because if it influence violence, it also can influence positivity.
It can.
So it go both ways. I don't hear nobody talking about that point.
Well, I think that's understated or not sufficiently emphasized, because there's no doubt that there are artists who, we used to call it culture, roots and culture, who are teaching people about reality in a positive way, teaching about the history, about the importance of the teachings of Marcus Garvey, a man like Burning Spear and many others. There's that side to it too. Bob Marley, obviously, Peter Tosh and so on. Those guys were not selling anything that would be considered negative. To the contrary, they have been uplifting and liberating people with their lyrics. But then there's another side of it, with other artists who kind of go down a different style, and the badness culture in Jamaica is there's some hype around that. So, they contribute to that, and they also feed off of that. So what I'm saying is, for those persons now, I think they need to be engaged with and shown what other ways they can fashion their lyrics, or how they can play a more constructive role in the youth mind, because we don't want a situation where youngsters are influenced because they rate the artist, and that is what he's saying. And so they think that's the right thing, or that's what they want to do. That we want to discourage that. But not by saying that them can't say this and they can't say that. Because I don't think that's the way you should deal with artists, but more reasoning with them, and maybe have associations of artists where these things come up, and other people from outside can come and share their point of view with them, so them get a better understanding of how society is looking at it and what we'd like to see them try and achieve.
And then why you're taking on people saying that politicians are hypocrites when they use these said artists in their campaigns?
I think that's fair comment. I think there is a lot of hypocrisy around that, so it's true. I mean, listen, man, politicians are human beings, and, it's a competitive field, and people are always trying to find a way of getting advantage over their opponent and so on. And sometimes, that strays into engaging with things that are not wholesome and shouldn't be done. And I try and avoid doing that, but I'm not saying I'm perfect or anything. But, you're right, there is some hypocrisy in all that, because I remember, even Brogard, adopt that persona, which is a persona coming out of a certain line of music around scamming and them things, and, became his thing, which was clearly not appropriate for a prime minister to have. And I think now he's trying to shed himself of it, but for many years that was part of his image, So that, I think, was something which was unfortunate. But, we need to learn and move on and improve as time goes by, so we don't make these mistakes and repeat them.
Is it a case where you guys are recruiting the artists, or they're just like followers of that particular party? So like, for instance, we see a Buju Banton, we see a Vibes Cartel. Recently again, I think it was Miss Williams, Chronic Law, Popcorn, endorsements. So is that case where these artists are just PMP or Labour Right, or una say, we had a party if we're repping.
Right. I think the artists are socially aware people. They're out there and they're lyricists, and so they have to, in building their content, they're very aware of what's going on. Some of them may come out of a family background, which leans in a particular direction, the thing we were talking about before. So I don't think it's really a case of recruiting them, but certainly we show them respect, and we build relationships with them, because they are influential, and with what they have to say matters, because people listen. So we do engage with them, but I don't think it's a recruiting thing in that sense. But more certain artists rate us or rate our tradition, and and so they're more inclined to give us the support.
Okay. Yeah. And me, I don't think they're that influential, to be honest. They're not, but I think influence is a choice. You get me? Because if you look upon Joe Biden and Kamala, right? If you think about influence, them should have win, because she have Beyonce.
Right.
That's like what a Black America. Then she have Taylor Swift, the biggest artist in the world.
Yeah.
They ever use America, the world, and she didn't win.
Yeah.
So enough time I hear people talk, and like them you see, let's say a cartel come out and it's a PMP, and not a PMP not winning. But I'm just you think people are just that stupid where them don't know so that's an artist? He probably doesn't know nothing about politics. them still have to listen to what you guys have to say.
Well, I take your point about the U.S. election and what happened with Kamala Harris and Democrats. And certainly in that instance, it didn't seem to have been sufficient to carry them home over the line in the circumstances of that election. But for example, I can think of in the 1972 election, which I was only 7 years old in 1972, so I don't really remember it personally, but what I've heard about it, you know, the PNP had a thing called, I think they call it the bandstand, and they went around the island, and certain artists followed them, including people like Bob Marley, Clancy Eccles, and enough other artists that were, you know, Max Romeo and others who were at the time singing edgy songs of protest and need for change at a time when Jamaica needed radical change because we were coming out of the colonial experience. We'd had 10 years of independence, but nothing had really changed. The same class system, the same race system was very much entrenched in the country. And Michael was coming really with a message of hope and deliverance from that. And so the music was very supportive of that. And I think that did add a lot to the campaign from what I've heard at the time. So, you know, it may depend on the circumstances in the society where the election is being heard. Some instances it may not have a big impact. In others it may have a significant impact.
Yeah, that you the whole Bob Marley thing, that was political as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, Bob, you know, Bob, I don't know what Bob had any party political leaning, really.
Come on.
Well, I don't know.
He's from Trenchtown.
Yeah, he's from Trenchtown.
Trenchtown.
Yeah, but hey, Trenchtown at that time, you know, Trenchtown, if you look at it, you know, it depends on where you were, below 7th Street or above, you know, because below 7th Street was laid right above us PNP. So it wasn't, but Bob, I think, because a Rasta had a different approach to those whole issues. He wasn't seeing it in a party political way, but maybe he bought into the message that Michael was bringing. Because Michael was bringing a message of, you know, radical reappraisal of society, changing some of those structures that were holding the masses down and things. So I'm sure Bob could relate to that message, you know? Yeah.
The healthcare workers, the teachers, they're complaining.
Yeah, they are.
The pay is low. And I will say politicians getting a bump in salary.
Yeah.
So what would the PNP plan to do about that?
Boy, that situation is really in need of attention. I try and avoid making promises which are not likely to be kept, which is, you know, politicians are known for promising things and not actually delivering on them. And there are plenty of instances of that with the current government. But I recognize that the salary restructuring exercise that was implemented 2-3-4 years ago, it's over a period of time, has left a lot of issues that people are concerned about. So, for example, in the case of the teaching profession, my understanding is that the principals did quite well out of the restructuring, and maybe the people at the bottom of the pay scale got a big percentage increase, though in dollar amounts it's modest because they're low earners at the moment. But the classroom teachers in particular, they didn't do well. I think they got this 20% and all of their allowances rolled in so that they're paying tax on their entire salary now as before they didn't. And there was a promise that on a net basis they would be no worse off, but many of them don't feel that promise was kept, and so on. And so the issues of keeping the teaching profession intact and having our people go into the profession and also people not leaving is something that we really have to address. And we have some ideas around how to do that. You know, we want to, for example, the same things I'm talking about for housing with public servants, which includes teachers, giving them a break with the interest rate, giving them on the allocation of houses in schemes that the NHT is funding or developing, giving them a preferred position in getting access to those homes, and the various other things that we have in mind for them, for the teachers in particular. But generally speaking, I think the whole public sector pay restructuring was soured because the way in which it was done was pressure was brought to bear on the bargaining groups, the teachers, etc., that they wouldn't get their retroactive forever unless they signed by the 31st of March, 2022, I think it was. And, or was it 2023, whichever one. And, you know, they eventually succumbed to that, and because they needed their retroactive payment and they didn't want it to be, deferred indefinitely and so on. And so they settled, but then within a month or two, the government said, well, MPs, ministers, etc., are going to get this massive increase. 200%, 300%.
Which is crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, now there's a history to that as to why the political class felt that this was justifiable. But in the context in which it was implemented, where others who were equally deserving or more deserving were being forced to accept a 20% increase over 3 years, and you're getting 200, a 10 times bigger increase, it was a bad look. And it's not, I think it demonstrated bad leadership, and it should not have been done. And had I been in power, then I would not have approached it that way. As I said at the time, I wouldn't be awarding myself and my colleagues an increase. That would have been something that would have been given to an independent body to make a recommendation on the issue, having studied it deeply, and then we would have, received that recommendation and made a decision. But it should not have just been, well, here we're going to give ourselves a 300% increase. And then having given himself the increase, when the SHIT hit the fan, he said, well, and the political damage was so, he said, well, I'm not going to take mine now,
Everybody's going to get one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had already said personally that I was going to cap mine at 20%, which is what the teachers got. And so I can't stop them paying me because I don't control the payroll, but I was going to make sure that anything over the 20% increase, I was going to spend on other causes, worthy causes. And I have been doing that, since then. So, but the whole thing left a very sour taste in the mouths of those who felt that they had been hard done by in that restructuring. And so us now coming into government, we have to really focus on how we can make it better for them. I'm not saying we can grant huge pay increases because we have to operate within the fiscal rules, which are in the law and which are very important to the society being stable and the economy having a chance to grow. But at the same time, there are other creative things that can be done to make their lives easier and better. For example, one of the things we're saying is if a teacher stays in the system as a teacher, for each year that they stay, they will get a reduction of their student loan. They get a credit for the year. And we'd also increase their motor vehicle allowance amount. So there's an incentive for them to stay in the system rather than leave. And we have some other ideas as well.
Yeah, because when you look on it, I used to attend Rallington Town Primary School, then go to Kingston College.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, teachers play so much roles.
Oh, God.
Like, I know teachers were send students to school, and them pay for them lunch every single day. So the fact that them, I feel come out for them pay for help kids, and then now them not have money for them own kids at home. It just doesn't.
It doesn't work, and as you've said, well, first of all, in a society like ours, education is really the route by which most Jamaicans achieve come out of intergenerational poverty. Mm-hmm. So if a child from a relatively modest home, where there's not much money around and things are hard, if that child can go through the school system and go to university and get a good job and be, they can help their family come out of that. So it's a very critical route to social mobility. And our teachers play a vital role in that as mentors in the classroom, especially given that the family structures are often very weak nowadays, because you have a lot of single parent families and not just that, but teenage pregnancies and that kind of thing. So if you look in communities and you see how the children, what they see and what they hear, it's not, a lot of it is not wholesome. So the teachers have to play a role in addressing that as well in the schools. And so we have to, our teachers are vital, not only to education, but to national development. And so we have to, try and do whatever we can to make it better for them.
Yeah. Taxes. I don't understand taxes at all. Where is this money going? It can't on the road them.
No.
And we would charge a lot to import cars. So
yes.
All right, cool. Well, let's say I buy a X6. The X6 costs 100,000 for it. I'm gonna pay like 80,000 to clear it out there. At least have good roads to drive this X6 on.
Right.
And there's no good roads.
No good roads.
So how does that make sense? So if you're gonna charge me money to get this car, at least spend the money on the road then.
There's a logic to what you're saying, Jay. Well, taxes in Jamaica, what are they spent on? Well, first of all, the biggest item used to be interest on debt. Mm-hmm. It is now salaries in the public sector. So we have to pay our teachers, we have to pay our nurses, we have to pay our police officers.
They don't feel paid.
They don't feel it, but that is the biggest charge on the budget currently. And then you have interest on the public debt is still a major item. And then apart from that, you have about $360 billion, what we call discretionary expenditure programs. And that's all kinds of things, rolling out NIDS or, tablets in schools or, there's a vast array of different things that are happening. And that's really where the priority input of a government can shift from party to party, so that because that's really what you have to play with, because you have to pay the salaries and you have to pay the interest. But the 360 billion is really where a different government might have a different approach to how you allocate that. Now, this government really, in my opinion, dropped the ball when it came to road maintenance, because they didn't put enough emphasis on maintaining, especially the roads which are not the major highways. So major highways have been, the toll roads, etc. Those are properly built and properly maintained. There are some other new roads which are there, and some of them haven't been built very well and need maintenance. But if you look at the interior roads and the scheme roads, the roads that people drive on every day, if they have a vehicle, they're in deplorable condition, and they have been for a while. And so what we have been talking about is really having a 10-year program of preventive maintenance, which is properly designed, where there are independent engineers who assess whether the work is being properly done. And part of achieving that is we have to have a stronger economy, because our economy has not been growing. I mean, even last year we had negative growth in Jamaica. 2024, the economy got smaller. None of the other Caribbean countries except Haiti was in that position. Other countries got slammed by Beryl hard, like St. Vincent and others. They were growing at 3, 4, 5%. We had negative growth. And so that's really why our focus as a party coming into government is on how can we get the economy to move forward and grow. Because it's a growth in the economy that's going to generate more revenue for the government that can do more things that need to be done, including fixing roads, paying teachers better, paying nurses better, police better, etc. So the key to it, everything is connected. Everything is everything, as they say. But unless you kind of get the economy moving in a really serious way, you're not going to achieve those things. And to get the economy moving in a serious way, you have to focus, I think, on education and training. You have to really train people in a more effective way to be ready for work and the type of jobs that are being created now. You also have to make the bureaucracy more efficient and less burdensome on people. That's something I'm very committed to leading when I'm Prime Minister. And then you have to also focus on the industries that have a chance of making a big difference in Jamaica. So we're looking at logistics because of our geographical location along the sea routes coming through the Panama Canal, that we can tap into those things. We can service the ships here. We can create value-added assembly here and so on. And those will be good quality jobs that can help to grow the economy, and also the cultural and creative industries because of the vibes that we have and our culture has, whether it be our food, our music, the way we talk, etc., that the whole world kind of rate with for that. We need to put some emphasis behind the creative practitioners who create that vibe and give them more support so that they can go out and make more money and build the brand internationally and also benefit the economy here. So these are some of the things we're talking about.
Yeah. But I must say, with customs though, we're gonna have to do something about customs, for sure. Like, them something with that wickedness. Wickedness. Only if you sell what they carry for double the price. That only for buy my car. And I gotta buy back my car from you. And I me buy my car. Customs is madness.
Are you talking about the rates of duty that are charged when import?
Yes, any. With a car, with a phone, it's madness. You know, some people come and work and travel. Right?
Yeah.
When they come and work and travel, them man in sleep,
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Like 80 days and 80 nights and a 40. And imagine when I come through the airport now and somebody has to search my suitcase and tell me that I have to pay them for use my things. Now, granted, when you can get a thing,
Yeah.
and I'm going to say a thing, I mean the beverage.
Yeah.
Big up your single. But me not upon that. Them somebody are madness, honestly. And again, as I said before, it's not like we can say we have roads and, Jamaica is just like so beautiful and all that stuff. It is, don't get me wrong, natural resources, but if I talk about the government or man-made, we don't really have much. If we're a bit honest, and then and next thing too, what the people are complaining about, why is the country for sale? You can't go on a beach. Every beach you have to pay for.
Yeah.
The river, some river you have to pay for too. No.
Yeah.
So what's this thing where people just owning natural resources?
Yeah, that is a policy failing of the successive governments. In developing our tourism industry, we, from the 80s coming up, we have really embraced this enclave system, the all-inclusive model, where the hotels basically provide the guests with all entertainment, all food and beverage, and keep them in there as much as possible. And they enjoy their experience. And if they're going out, it's in a very supervised way and so on. But part of that is because everything is paid for up front, and so there's no cash being exchanged in the hotels, really. They manage who can come on to the property in a very serious way. And that has meant that they've excluded access to the beach, which they don't own. The beach is public because the law in Jamaica is between the low water mark and the high water mark, which is depending on the tidal flow. That is the crown land that belongs to the government, as does the seabed. But the land on the land side of the high water mark would be part of the title of the hotel. So they basically restrict access to the beach and keep people out. And that's a problem because less and less Jamaicans are finding it harder and harder to get access to enjoy our beaches. And we're committed to working on a solution for that. Right now in the Beach Control Act, there is a provision for the Beach Control Authority to establish a mandatory easement over property to give access to the beach. What that means is they can put in place a right of way, a walkway, that people can access the beach through somebody's property. And we think that if necessary, we would negotiate with the hotel owners to say, all right, well, look, you have to open a pathway along even the edge of your boundary so people can get onto the beach and enjoy themselves. The beaches have to be available for everybody. They can't just, and the rest of the Caribbean is like that. Why do we have to be different? I mean, you go to Barbados, you can go on any beach.
And that's my thing.
Yeah.
When you compare it to the rest of the Caribbean, it's just like them not charge them ridiculous taxes here, but them I make more money. So if we charging all of this and people are paying it, where's the money?
Well,
oh, in a negative.
I don't know about the taxes because in Barbados have a whole heap of taxes. In fact, I think they're probably more heavier tax than we are. But then you might say that they see the benefits more clearly that they're getting for the money. I mean, part of the problem in Jamaica is corruption, where people, so much of the resources are being wasted by being siphoned off through various means. You have these big infrastructure projects where you have a main contractor and then the subcontractors. And of course, there are opportunities for persons to receive payments for having nominated a contractor and that kind of thing. And there are various other ways in which all kinds of procurement violations go on in Jamaica and money is wasted. And, it's been estimated that if we were to really significantly reduce corruption in the country, we would be growing at a much faster rate. So it's a thing that needs to be tackled. And, I've played my part in trying to get that done because the Integrity Commission was something that I conceived of and with some other people who I had brought on board to work on a project to design a system for dealing, an institutional framework for dealing with the corruption problem. This is when I was Minister of Justice, and we developed the legislation. We got Cabinet to approve it. We took it to Parliament. We took it through a joint select committee where other stakeholders could come and comment on it, refined it in that process, and then we lost the election in 2016. But the government, they felt compelled they had to pass it, and they did. They made a few changes, but nothing too significant. But then now, because it's doing its work, and it's going after people who are apparently violating the corruption laws, and some of those people are on their side, they're not comfortable and they're taking action to kind of cramp the style of the Integrity Commission. And we're not in favor of that at all.
What's this illicit 6?
It's now 8.
8 now? Wow.
Yeah.
You know them?
Well, we don't know. The only one we know is the Prime Minister because a report came on his situation to Parliament in August, September last year. He's being under investigation for illicit enrichment, which is an offense. It's a corruption offense under the Corruption Prevention Act. But in their annual report, the Integrity Commission has said that there are 8 persons, presumably the Prime Minister is one, but there are 7 others who are under investigation. But they have not disclosed who those persons are yet because the reports have not come to Parliament yet on those other individuals. Why it's taking so long, I do not know.
You have an idea? Like you have somebody at Parliament,
You hear rumors.
I know him, Paul, that for sure.
You hear rumors, but I wouldn't want to speculate on something as serious as that.
No, okay.
Yeah.
And how you do corruption within the PNP?
Well, zero tolerance, I'm not, and they know that this is something that I'm not going to tolerate. I don't, to my mind, we're entrusted with power by people to work on people's behalf. And it's absolutely unacceptable for us to abuse that trust by doing things which are not permitted under the law. So everybody who, in all of our shadow spokespersons for the different portfolios, our shadow ministers, have all signed the Leadership Code of Conduct, which was developed by the Integrity Commission, where we sign on to maintaining certain principles of proper and good governance. All of us have signed it. I was the first one to sign it, and all of my colleagues have signed it on our side. The government have not signed it. None of them have signed it. I don't know why they won't sign it, but they haven't signed it. So all I can say is, from my perspective, if people transgress, they will be held accountable, and I'll leave it at that.
You think Mr. Holness is a good Prime Minister?
I think he has had his 9 years, and it's time to move on. Yeah. I think that he's unable to deliver the change that Jamaica needs now. The main achievement of the last 9 years has been the continuation of the debt reduction program that started under Portia, that was institutionalized under Portia, which they inherited as a thing that had to be carried out, and they have carried it out, and I've given them credit for that. And the debt of the country is now, relative to the size of the economy, is at a much more manageable level than it was in 2013 when we took office. We brought it down from 147% of the size of the economy, GDP. We brought it down to 115. They inherited it there, and they've taken it down now after 9 years to 68, 69%. So that's an achievement, and I wouldn't never say otherwise. But in terms of growing the economy and dealing with the other issues of inequity in the society and the lack of social cohesion, that is part of the problem why we have high crime rates and we have heavy migration, brain drain, all of those things. I think they've been a failure.
Yeah, because I know people, as them graduate high school, it's like, I look at visa, bro.
Yeah, And so we're training people, we're investing in people, because, Jamaica public system, you don't pay fees to go to school and so on. But so where the state is not doing enough to make it attractive for people to stay. We have the second highest rate of brain drain in the world, meaning the second highest percentage of our population leave who having been trained here. So it's a big problem.
And some don't return. Like even me, like anytime people say, "Yo, bro, you have your papers, what you do,
Yeah. Yeah, nice, man.
Yeah, no, we are make a look of money.
Yeah, exactly.
But imagine if I make money like you. My God. Life for that nice one.
I know I make no money nowadays. My money making days are over. Right now I'm just I'm on a different thing,
That's what I'm gonna see you make real money. Like you never make no more money.
Well,
like you're good. Well. One day with time you'll get there.
Yeah.
So now, like brain drain and all of that. Cool? What the PNP plan for do for make the people them stay?
Well, first of all, for those critical professionals I was talking about, like teachers and other public servants, we're trying to make the rules around housing and how the NHT functions more attractive for them, to give them inducements. We have some things that we're saying that we would, some of the things that I've already mentioned around reducing the student debt and increasing their motor vehicle allowances over time, encouraging them to stay. We have a number of things like that we're proposing to do. But the most important thing, is to train the people, train young people so that they can actually fill job opportunities at a higher level of income than what is now being done. So Jamaica needs to move up the value chain. Instead of, for example, our BPO industry, our global services, being focused on tasks that are very simple and that don't take a lot of intellectual effort and therefore are paid relatively modestly. We need to train our people so we're doing the outsourcing that really adds more value to the companies that are outsourcing. What we talk about knowledge process outsourcing. So you have accounting services, legal services, data management and coding, all these things that, if we are able to move up the value chain, that those jobs are better paying, and therefore people will be able to earn a better income, and and the economy will grow more rapidly.
Yeah.
And the thing about economic growth is that with the right policies in support of it, it is a self-reinforcing thing. So, as you grow, people have more money, they spend more, that generates more opportunities, that generates more income, that means you grow further. And so it's a virtuous circle, as opposed to where we are now, where we slowed down and went into reverse in 2024. And now we're scrambling to see if we can come out of it. But, we're not doing it by any kind of fundamental adjustments to the things that have put us where we are to begin with.
Gotcha. This rumor about Jamaica having oil, is there any truth to it?
Well, there have been traces, as I understand it. Traces have been found offshore especially in our economic zone. There's the way the maritime law works is that you have your territorial sea around it, which is a relative narrow band, and then you have a much larger band of area that is really your economic zone, your exclusive economic zone. And in that area, Jamaica, I believe, has found traces, encouraging traces of oil and gas maybe. But until you finish the process of exploration and assess whether or not it is viable commercially to take it out, to extract it, you don't really have anything of value. Okay. So that process is not yet complete. So we don't really know, but we're hopeful. We hope we do. Yeah.
And is this year an election year for sure?
It is, yeah, because constitutionalists do no later than September.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you feel going into this election?
Awesome. I feel like, we have rebuilt the party. We have unified the party. And we're on the ground, and people are responding very positively to me and to the party. And we've started now to roll out our platform of ideas, and they're being well received, and we have more to come. And we're just going to continue in that vein and hopefully avoid mistakes. And the people have a choice, And it's great that people have a choice. And I believe that the majority of voters will vote for us.
And then why we don't change how the winners win or who becomes the prime minister, whereas in like seats? Mm-hmm. Why is not just like, all right, cool. I prefer Mark Golding as my leader, but I don't prefer
X.
Yeah, X as my MP. I want us to vote for Mark Golding as the leader, and then the MPs and do them MP thing.
Yeah. Well, the reason why we don't have that is because that's not the system that we evolved out of. And the constitution that we have, which is the foundational document that sets all the rules around how you elect people and who is a leader and who isn't, is based on this, the system that we evolved from, which is really the parliamentary model, where you have constituencies that appoint MPs, elect MPs. MPs now decide who among them will be the prime minister. So it's a kind of delegated thing where
it can't change.
It can change, but it means constitutional reform, and it means getting enough people on board to support that change. Yeah. Because Jamaican people, for that to change, it would need a referendum, and so it would have to go to the people to vote on whether they want to change the system in that way. And the nature of things in Jamaica are that in order for that to happen, I think both political parties would have to support it, okay. and then I think the referendum was likely to have a yes vote, but. Right now, I'm for sure the Jamaica Labour Party are not in favor of that system. And we were originally supportive of that system, but because the JLP were not, and we realized we couldn't make any progress if we just held a hard end, and there are a lot of things we wanted to see move forward around constitutional reform. We want to see an impeachment procedure to hold parliamentarians accountable if they act in a terrible way. We wanted to have other things, the Charter of Rights, which was enacted with consensus in 2011, we wanted to make that happen. So we've been prepared to say, all right, we will accept the parliamentary system for the time being, while we try and achieve other things. We want the CCJ to become our final court. We want to get rid of the King of England as our head of state and have a Jamaican head of state, and so on. But ultimately, we are open to moving to a presidential system, because we were founded in 1938, that was what our preferred position. But because we realized you can't achieve that without consensus, and there hasn't been consensus around that, we've been prepared to kind of put that on the back burner while we try and achieve some other things for which there is consensus.
Yeah, because imagine this now. Let's say Mr. Holness doesn't win his constituency, but yet still him get...
If him don't win him constituency, him out. Oh, that's
word.
the point you're making.
Oh, that's how it works?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
No, if you can't win your seat, you're out.
Okay.
Yeah. When I say you're out, you cannot be prime minister if you're not.
Oh, so somebody else would have... The JLP would have there still be a JLP person.
If they have a majority in the
Okay.
House, yes, they would choose among them. And the other MPs who don't support that person would choose among them who is the leader of the opposition. That's how it works. So the majority MPs choose the prime minister and the minority MPs choose the leader of the opposition. That's how our system works. And there are countries which have achieved great progress with that system. Look at Singapore, for example. Comes out of the same tradition as us, but is now a wealthy country. So they have just managed their affairs more effectively than we have over the period of their independence. Admittedly, the situations were not identical. Some of the issues that we had coming historically, where we are coming from, is different to where they're coming from, and so on. But I'm just saying that the system itself is not the reason. The political system is not the reason why we can't make the progress we want. There are other things at play that cause that. And that's not to say that the system we have is perfect and that we couldn't move to another system which might suit us better. I'm just saying, when you're deciding that, bear in mind that there are other countries that have made tremendous progress with the system that we have. More, and that. So maybe that's not why we're not where we want to be. Maybe that's not the reason. And we shouldn't grasp at the wrong straw in trying to find solutions to our problems.
A final question coming over time on a busy man.
Yeah.
This election here, what's your message to the die-hearted PMPR Labour people? Like, is it time for us, it's not that serious? Like, yes, whoever run the country, serious, because you have people livelihood in their hands. But there's a recent video the other day, I see Andrew Holness walk through a community and there were some PMP supporters and them come out, them dye them here, arrange everything, just for screw up them face of the Prime Minister. So I was like, is it that serious?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I saw that video. But my message to all Jamaicans is we value our democracy and the right to choose, and we must respect each other's right to choose. So there's no place in our politics for violence, for intimidation, or for fraud, electoral fraud. Let's have a clean election and let the people make their decision. If they choose our side and me, fine. If they choose the existing side and Mr. Holness, so be it. But let us have a free and fair election. That's my primary message, and because the system of democracy is something that we have built for ourselves over time, and we have the freedoms that it guarantees are important to us as Jamaicans. Jamaicans want to be free. Jamaicans want to have the right to express themselves. They want to have the right to make the choices that they want to make in life. And we see where other countries are moving into a more autocratic system, and where the repercussions of that are starting to become evident, and we don't want to go there. We want to maintain a free Jamaica for our people. And so the election is an important process, vital, but it must be done in a way that is consistent with the democratic traditions and values that we uphold. So that would be my message around that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining.
Yeah, man.
Yes,
Mr. Jai, respect.
Yeah, so let's be honest. This was a very interesting. I have enough more questions to ask about another time.
Another time.
Go to the election.
Yeah, man. Cool.
All right, we're gone.